Okay, if you're a good cook or a chef, I'll bet you have secrets for your kitchen that we don't want to know about. The phrase they say is, how the sausage gets made. There's some secrets in being a good chef. If you were when you were a nurse, were there things that you did that the patients never saw, but it made your job easier? Yep. If you're a grandparent, you have tricks for the little ones that just they don't know. The little ones, they don't have that awareness yet, but you know how to like steal a nose really well, or whatever the tricks are. Every job, every role has trade secrets. I'm going to give you a trade secret about preachers. This is a big one. There are only 2 Easter sermons. There's only 2 kinds of Easter sermons in the whole world. Every Easter sermon is either he has risen or he is risen. That's all you're going to hear on this day. So the way he has risen, those churches right now, they're going to say he has risen, and what are you going to do about it? And then what is God going to do about what you're going to do about it, which can feel a little threatening. And then he is risen sermons are he is risen, and what is God doing now? And what are you going to do about what God is doing? Which hopefully is about freedom and hopefully is life-giving. You see that difference? He has, he is. Now, if you just want the conclusion to this sermon, if you're rewatching it online, you just want to skip ahead, this is it. This is the conclusion for every Easter you're ever going to hear here. He is risen. That's how we. That's what I'm interested in. What is God doing, and what are you going to do about it? And frankly, as she just read, Mary Magdalene already preached he has risen, and I don't want to follow up Mary Magdalene. She's the first Easter preacher. She did her job. So he is risen. God is working. That I can work with. So 1, Easter is a story from way back then about right now that matters forever. If you're a note taker, Easter is a story about way back then for right now that matters forever, which sounds a little heavy. So here's how we're going to start with a little backstory. To inform, some of you have barely ever met me, and so I want to give you a little backstory on what is this guy all about. He doesn't look like a preacher. He doesn't seem like a preacher. Here's the background. This is the 3rd weirdest job I've ever had, this preacher thing. Number 3. The 2nd weirdest job that I had was in college. I was living in England, and once in a while, when they needed someone just like me, I would get paid, just a little bit, to stand in British police lineups. I made £10 for like 35 minutes. It's $25 now, something like the conversion college a long time ago. You sit in a little room and you wait in British. I know you've seen movies in American. In British, there's like little cubbies, so you don't see the other people that you're standing next to. And there's little lines behind your head to show just how tall you are. There's a bright light. Theoretically, someone looks at you and they say, "That's the one. They stole my bicycle." As far as I'm aware, no one ever picked me. But that was my number 2 weird. My number 1 weirdest job was actually something that I did in seminary. Now, you got to picture, I looked a little different. We all did 20 years ago. Tom, what did I look like in seminary? So we might have to have a fundraiser at church, grow it or keep it short, and then we'll see. You put the dollars in the buckets. Usually my hair was a curly, crazy mess, and sometimes I had this big, thick, absurd beard at the time. You can get rid of that now because no one wants to see that. But with that look, with that and a big beard, I got a gig, and it was like 6 hours, 4 hours a week, modeling as Jesus. I was a Jesus model. Now, this tiny Armenian artist, and he had one of those little things you hold in your hands and you could mix all the paints. So he would have me like kneel and pray and look at the sky. He would have me kind of fake hang on a cross, which was a weird spiritual experience. There's one painting in the world where I am staring very awkwardly at Mary Magdalene, who she grew up to be a Lutheran priest, and she's preaching right now too, somewhere. My Armenian artist would paint hyper-realistic. I mean, it's really impressive, these scenes. And it was a strange spiritual experience for me. I would look at the paint, and then I would pose for 15 minutes, and it goes from like Hanson to Jesus. Oh my gosh, Jesus showed up. And then I would take a break, and he would paint, and it'd be just boring old me. And then he'd paint a little more, and it's Jesus again. And that might be impossible for you to believe that there's anything between me and Jesus, but use your imagination. Now, I know what you're thinking. Jesus didn't have red hair. Yeah, right? He wasn't white either, for anyone who's wondering. But there's this obscure set of fragments that aren't in the Bible. It's called the Gospel of Peter. We only have a few scraps of them, but somewhere in the 2nd century, some Christian storyteller writes in there, King David in the Old Testament is described as having red hair. Jesus, 1,000 years later, is supposed to be a descendant of King David. Apples and trees, they don't fall too far apart, and so he says Jesus must have had red hair. Okay? There are a lot of problems with that argument 1,000 years down the road. I don't know why anyone would believe that argument, but this artist paid me enough to buy books and beer as much as I needed, so that's what it is. The problem with this job came when I was on the cross. See, apparently the Gospel of Peter, or some ancient source, says that Jesus was supposed to be a little bit more than 6 feet tall. I'm only 5'10". And for the artist, the Lord and Savior had to be stretched out, and he was struggling to paint hyper-realistic and stretching my body out. So the mistake came when I opened my mouth and tried. Have you ever made a mistake from opening your mouth? Yeah, ask one too many questions and life changes. So I'm trying to ease the artist's anxiety around painting his red-haired white Jesus. And I asked him, do you think that they measured Jesus before the crucifixion? Like maybe the Romans put him in a police lineup and had like a 6-foot line on him? Isn't it weird that they would just measure some regular rabbi? Like why would history care? Name me anyone else in history who was measured as 6 feet tall. Or probably they measured him after the resurrection when it was clear that he was important. And after the resurrection, though, if that's the case, maybe he was kind of floaty, And how do you know that after the resurrection it was the same Jesus as before, but same body? So you can just paint me as 5'10" Jesus, and Jesus was probably like that before. I got fired for opening my mouth. If I ever think that this job is too important, I can just remember that I got fired as Jesus, so I stay in my lane and Jesus can have his lane. Now, the point of this story, there is a point. The point of this story, to the artist, what mattered was the body, and what mattered was the scene, and what mattered is what had happened. And according to a lot of Christians, what matters is the body and a suspicious historical record and what has happened. And according to a lot of Christians, our job, if you take that title as Christian, our job is to believe that story about a body and about what had happened one time way back then. And to some Christians, if we question that, or if we think that something about faith is even more important, well, shame on you. And you might be on the wrong team now, maybe forever. Some people get so fixated on he has risen, what happened back then, that they lose track of what God is doing right now with that story and with our story. In fact, some people are so committed to their version of the story that they end up throwing out what the Bible actually says about Easter, which is a lot weirder and a lot better than a 5'10" or a 6-foot tall Jesus. For instance, some of these gospels, we read one gospel, bizarre stories, like Mary's best friend is standing in front of her and she doesn't recognize him. That's weird. There's the story of Jesus walking through a wall. That's weird. He's walking on the road with some dudes talking about himself, and then he's like, hi, and they, oh my gosh, that's you. There are these weird stories that have very little, if anything, to do with body stuff. Most of the stories in the resurrection are not about body stuff. Even that Doubting Thomas, he gets that great name. He's the one who says, I'm not so sure about this story you're telling me. And Jesus says, here, feel me right here in the side. Other than that story, which may be more about the sanctity of doubt and how good it is to bring our doubt to God, other than that, there's no story in the resurrection that focuses on the body. Whatever else is going on in the first Easter, something else matters on that Monday after and on the Thursday after and 2,000 years later. Because those gospel writers, they mix up a lot of details about what happened on April 5th, 33 AD. But in so many ways, they are perfectly consistent about how the resurrection event matters to people 30 and 40 years later, 2,000 years later. They all agree that something matters deeply about the way it changes lives. Or take Paul. Paul wrote a chunk of the New Testament. And he did that way before the Gospels. So the stories that we know are later. Paul is writing letters to churches, and he's just trying to figure out what this Christian thing is. He asks in Corinthians, he asks himself rhetorically, what is Easter all about? He could have said, body gets up and walks away, and you believe it or else. He could have said, he has risen, and if you don't believe like that, and if you don't vote like you believe like that, then you're fired. He does not say that in Corinthians or anywhere else. What he says is Easter, Jesus' resurrection. He calls it a soma pneumaticon. I doubt it can get, wow, it does a pretty good job. Yeah, pretty good job. Soma pneumaticon. It's three Greek words jammed together. It's not a Hebrew thing. It's not a Greek thing. It's not a Roman thing. What do we got here? So many emoticons. I like that. Yeah. It's close, though, actually. It's emotional. So this is the first time in history that anyone said so many emoticons. And it's the first time in history anyone ever said in the Bible, so anywhere, any writing. First time anyone said these three words jammed together. Let's just peel them apart. Soma means body. That's kind of an easy one. So what that tells me is bodies matter to God, which is good because sometimes my body hurts and sometimes your bodies ache and sometimes our bodies are tired and miserable, and when people are around me, when I'm miserable, I feel bad about how that makes them miserable. Sometimes my body opens up in joy, and all the times we are called to respect people's bodies. And I really hope that bodies have something to do with the heartbeat of the world. I hope that God is as intimate with us as God is infinite with the universe. The second word is pneuma. It's where we get the word pneumonia. Some of you know that word means breath or spirit, which to a lot of people is very different than body. And I'm glad that's part of the story also, because at the root, most of my problems, most of the world's problems have little to do with bodies or anything we can touch or even money we can touch. The root of our problems are around greed and loneliness and anger and some lack of fulfillment. And if we're going to heal any of those, we need a spiritual resurrection in here. The best prayers call the beyond within to lift us from these tombs of anxiety and distress toward peace and hope. So we have soma and pneuma. The third word is icon. You know what it means? Icon. Yeah, just that one's not hard. It just means it's a picture of it. Icon means it looks like that. So when it looks like that, it's kind of like that. It's an emoticon of like that. So when Paul wonders about Easter, he wonders this 20 and 30 and 40 years before the gospel writers put pen to paper. Paul says, Easter is so mysterious we can't even explain it. There aren't even words to explain this thing that is happening. So he says, I'm going to be a poet. He says, resurrection is a picture of spirit and body doing something. He says, it's like at our weakest, we're just regular old people. And then, we do some great things. But once in a while, we transcend these limits of just being human, and we do something truly beautiful and amazing. It's like taking the best of our emotion and our self-understanding, and somehow that just rises towards sanctified living. It's like we have a glimpse, a breakthrough, a glimpse of what we can let die and what we can lift up, which is about freedom and growth. It's like an unfolding where pain is not the last word. It's like this beginning of a new way of being where you're invited to see the beauty through the brokenness, where you are urged to create wonder through the mundane, where you are drawn to make peace where there is conflict, justice where there is exploitation, and hope where there is despair. Easter is an eternal beginning of a new way of being. It is the beginning of a new world that does not run you into the ground, but gives you new breath. It is the beginning of a new order where love is more powerful than power. Resurrection is the beginning of a new heart where grace soaks in deeper than shame. It is the beginning of a new wisdom where listening and laughing are more valuable than getting it right. It is the always beginning of our chance to see the world as eternally recreating life and love. And may it be so. May it be so for those of you who have bodies that ache, for those of you who have bodies that are judged, for those of you who have bodies that are overregulated. May it be there for your spirits that are worn out. May it be so for your spirits that are told you are too much. May it be there for those of you whose spirits are ready to soar. May it be so for the story that is from way back then, that matters now, and will be eternal. Amen.